Welcome everybody to this brand new F1 Gamer Dad video where we are focusing on the Nurburgring 24 hours of 2023. It is race week. Welcome in everybody. Running this video for two reasons. I have never done this race. I've never run this session. So I am using this as a huge learning opportunity for myself, but I feel there are thousands of people in the same boat as me. So creating this video to provide awareness for everyone else who's running through the same things this week, everyone who is approaching this for the first time. It looks to be an incredible event. It is the flagship iRacing special event of the year. So we're going to be running through a few things in this video. We're going to be going through all the event information. We're going to be going through what to look out for this week. So what to really focus on when you're working on your setups, when you're working on your team strategy and schedules. We're going to be looking at everything that you need to practice. And special hint, it's a lot more than you think. And it's not just racing. We're then going to be looking at the race itself and things to keep in mind. I've scanned all the forums, all of the Reddit posts. I won't say I've scanned all of them, but I've scanned an absolute multitude of sources to get the best info from seasoned veterans who've run this multiple times before. We'll be looking at strategies on how to approach damage if you encounter it during the race, which from the sounds of it, everyone will encounter at some point, whether it's down to you and something completely of your making or completely out of your control. We need to be aware of it. We need to be prepared for it in the eventuation that we do get damage. And then we're going to be looking at teamwork. So this is obviously a team event, minimum of 2 drivers, and you'd be crazy to do this with 2 drivers. Kudos to anyone who does this with 2 drivers. But what to look out for with the team as well, especially in the lead up during this week. What sort of things to be thinking about, making sure you've got coverage for the whole race. We're going to be talking through and breaking down all of this in this video. Without further ado, let's get into the event info. So the 24-hour of Nürburgring is split into 4 different sessions, 4 different time slots to cater for different time zones. The first of which is May the 12th. So all of these starting on May the 12th. So the first of which starts May the 12th on Friday. These are all GMT time zones as well. So adjust that to your local time as necessary. I will be including a link to a spreadsheet called Sassy Apps Endurance Manager as well, which is an absolute godsend when you're trying to figure out stint times and local times and all those sorts of different things with driver availability for your team for the event. So time slot 1 is Friday, 10 p.m. GMT. Time slot 2 kicks off Saturday morning, 7 a.m. GMT. Time slot 3, Saturday afternoon, midday GMT. And then we've got time slot 4, which is Saturday at 4 p.m. GMT. So always best to think about who you've got available for race start, who you've got available for the night session, who you've got available for the morning, and make sure you've got coverage there for the team. Now, just a little touch on if you don't know about the Nürburgring 24 hours or if this is new to you. If this track is new to you, please maybe jump off this video now, go run some practice, learn the track. I've seen anywhere from sort of 6 to 8 hours people are quoting for them to be comfortable with the track. I learnt this track back in Gran Turismo days, probably around Gran Turismo 3 or 4. So it's second nature to me, and that's why night running for me is not an issue at all. It's like racing on the back of my hand. I know the corners very, very well. But if this track isn't familiar to you, go get some practice because it will take a while for that muscle memory to kick in, to be comfortable with not just what corner is which, because there are far too many corners to know exactly the corner you're on at any one time quickly, but really to sort of break up the track into segments. I always think there's probably 3 distinct segments to this track. So familiarize yourself with the track so that when you're tired and fatigued, when your team is counting on you to bring in a solid stint, nothing crazy, but a solid stint late in the race in the last sort of 6 hours. Even with fatigue, you're able to get around safely. You don't necessarily need to be the quickest in this race, but getting around safely is key. Now, just a note on the event itself. So the 24 hours, it's a 24-hour endurance race. We've run through that. It's held on the Nürburgring Nordschleife combined circuit. So it does combine the Grand Prix Sprint Streck circuit and the Nordschleife, which is just steeped in history from various touring car series, Formula One series, other open wheel series over its lifespan. It is 25.9 kilometers long, which just goes to what I was saying earlier. Making sure you're familiar with the track is a big task. Being quick is an even bigger task. So just making sure that you take that time without any pressure this week to learn the track is going to be essential. Now, this special event is open to anybody above D class and 4.0 D class road rating. Okay, this sim date is May 20th, 2023, and the sim session start time, or the time of day setting, is 3:13 p.m. Very specific. Not 3:20, not 3:10, it's 3:13. Now, the actual race session will have a 20-minute warm-up. Qualifying is attached to the race. So in previous iterations of the Nürburgring 24 hours, there has been, and actually in separate race sessions, so I know in VRS a couple of weeks ago, there was an unattached qualifying session. So at any point during that race week, you could go in and qualify, set your fastest time. Then for the next race session, you wouldn't have to worry about qualifying because it is, an 8-minute to 9-minute lap, depending on your skill level and depending on your class as well. So it is an attached qualifying run. It's solo. It is 25 minutes long and it allows for 2 laps. So really think through that, whether you're going to empty out fuel for 1 lap and do a one lap sprint after your out lap, and then come back in and do another lap and take the fuel out again, or whether you're going to run 2 laps, allow for 2 laps of fuel, getting the tires up to temperature with the first out lap and maybe the first qualifying lap as well, not going for broke, not going all out on that first session or the first attempt. So that's another strategy question to bring up. The weather is dynamic. In this event, the splits are organized by iRacing. So when you go in, and I'll include a link to Sassy App's Insurance Manager in the notes of this episode as well. But when you go in there is a tab for iRating. So you can kind of calculate by your team the average iRating, which will then suggest what kind of split you're going to be organized into. So if you have a 4K iRating driver and the rest of you are 1.5, you will obviously balance that out based on that 4K driver dragging you up into a higher split, and vice versa. If you're all 5K iRating drivers and you have one 900 iRating driver, you'll be brought down that level as well to account for the difference. This is a team event. I've already mentioned that before. Minimum 2 drivers, maximum is 16 drivers. That would be amazing to see a team with 16 drivers. Have not seen that done before, but that would be legal and possible. If you are trying to solo this, you will DQ at the end. So you will be disqualified at the line if you do attempt to do this all solo. Not to mention you will be in a world of hurt as well. The stop and go limit is 100 incidents for a stop go, and every 20 incidents after will incur a stop-go additionally. There is no limit to these, so you will not get disqualified on incident points alone. The maximum field size for these splits is 55. Now, I'll run through next the cars and classes that are running in this event. The balance of power has been added as well, so I will include that. That was just added yesterday morning. The balance of power will be reevaluated and readjusted as needed the Wednesday prior to the event as well. So just bear in mind all the practice sessions that you run now, make sure they are included, or make sure they include the balance of power settings for each car and class. but just bear in mind that that could change after the Wednesday. Okay, so we've had a slide off there. You can see me pushing in the replay camera through the GP circuit. Funny note, I run a lot of VLN races, so the GP circuit is pretty foreign to me. So something coming into the 24 hours for me, for instance, is getting more comfortable with the GP circuit, especially when fatigued and especially at night. Anyway, back to the details. So this is a multi-class event. So the first class that we'll run through is the GT3 class, the class that will be kicking off the race. So we've got the BMW M4 GT3. With BOP, we are losing 2.5% power. Next, we have the Mercedes AMG GT3 2020 version, which is losing 3.25% of power and adding a 10 kilogram ballast. We then have the Porsche 911 GT3R, which rounds out the GT3 class. Next, we have the GT4 class, and we have the Aston Martin Vantage GT4, which is losing 2%. Next up is the Porsche 718 Cayman GT4 Club Sport MR, which is staying as it is. Now, single make classes do not get affected by balance of power. Obviously, they're all the same car. So in single make classes, we have the Porsche 992 GT3 Cup. And then we have the touring class, which is the Audi RS3 LMS. And we have the spec class, which is the Toyota GR86, which would be just so much fun going around here for 24 hours on edge. I really think you guys will have an absolute blast around here. Okay, that takes us to the end of the event setup information. Next, I'm going to run through just a few notes on what to work on during this week, and a few notes on setups, qualifying, and the race. Now, remembering this is so you've got attached qualifying. Qualifying is important because you want to be, as soon as possible, you want to be up with people of similar situations, people of similar pace levels, depending on who's starting for you in your car. But remember, this race is 24 hours long. It is very easy to get caught up in situations within the first hour or so, within the first 5 hours, within the first 20 hours. Save your fighting as much as possible and save your pushing for the last hour of the race. This is a long race. There needs to be very little pressure in the early stages. So if someone is pressuring you from behind, let them go. Have the long game in mind. Okay, unless you're in top split and you're absolutely going to need to be lapping within a tenth of a second of your other competitors for the entirety of the race because everyone is on your exact level. Unless you're in that situation, pick your battles. Really pick your battles. Now, these are all things to work on during the week, okay? And this goes to my triathlon-focused mind, which is you should not be practicing anything new or trying anything new on race day. You should have practiced absolutely all these scenarios during the week so that nothing is a surprise. Obviously, things will come up, and there will be surprises. That's the beauty of endurance racing. But we're trying to minimize that as much as possible to make sure that we know what could happen. We know the consequences of what could happen as well. So, things to think about: curbs. This track is 25.9 kilometers long. There are a lot of curbs, and the curbs, as you'll see on the replay screen when we hit some, they're very high. They're very large curbs. They have the ability to, even if you've run through it 100 times, on the 101st time you hit it, it could spit you out in a different direction based on track temperature, based on your tire temperatures, based on the angle that you hit it and how fatigued you are. So how you hit it compared to the last time you hit it. So we'll see here we're coming up to the carousel, or the first carousel I should say, and all of these areas, see the curbs here and see how the car reacts when we go through them. The carousel's a great case in point. You might come in there a little too hot, you might hit those inside curbs and it might spit you out the other side of the carousel, or you might spin because one of your tires is up in the air. You need to be prepared for all these scenarios and practice them during race week. Fuel consumption and tyre wear kind of go hand in hand here. So making sure you're running as many full stints as possible during this week. Obviously, hot lapping will happen. You want to know what your absolute peak pace is, but you'll barely be running to that pace during the race anyway, because you'll be in traffic, you'll be in different track temperatures, you will be trying to conserve fuel to eke out an extra lap or a half a lap on a fuel stint if you can, especially if you're up behind slower cars. So running full stints, checking the tyre wear as soon as you get out of the car, and recording that in your endurance manager spreadsheet as well, because that will calculate your fuel stints per driver. And that's important. You want to know who's in the car, what their average fuel consumption is, what their average tyre wear is, so you know when to pit for fuel and tyres and vice versa. Damage is another one. You want to keep an eye on damage during your practice sessions, because as I mentioned before, when you hit curbs, you want to see what the effect is on the car. So if you're hitting curbs during practice and you come in, you might actually have optional repairs there to sort out, and it might not be because of a wall hit or any damage against a fellow competitor, but it might be floor damage from the jump or the dip. It might be from hitting the curbs too excessively. It might be running over a curb and unbalancing the car jumps a little bit and you've damaged the floor. So you want to keep an eye on that again, so you know what that's going to play out as during the race. Another thing to practice at this stage as well, and this is something that me, being a complete rookie to this 24-hour race in particular, is practicing at night. If I didn't do any practice at night and I jumped into one of my stints during the night, I would be at sea. Okay, it's the exact same track, it's got the exact same corners, but the visibility during night, I will skip now and transition the camera to nighttime, because you'll see this is a completely different world. Okay, exact same track, exact same conditions, a little bit cooler, granted, but the visibility is daunting, even here on the GP circuit. Okay, even with some floodlights lighting the circuit, it is very bare visibility. So you need to practice this not just by yourself, but with other cars as well, so you know what to expect during night. Something that's working quite well for me is actually in my sim rig, turning all the lights off in the room while I'm running at night, so that I don't have other reflections, so that I don't have anything else taking up my field of view other than the actual circuit outside the car window. Turning up your gamma or your brightness on your monitors as well could be a tip here. Just making sure that it doesn't affect any other kind of visibility for other competitors or other braking marker points for you, but that definitely could be a help as well. Now, I've already mentioned, but I think it bears mentioning again during this section, to work out your schedules. Okay, this should be absolutely something that you get 100% sorted during this week, so that you're not scrambling to find an extra driver to fill in any scheduling gaps, any availability gaps on the weekend when the race comes up, especially Friday before. Things will happen. Things will come up last minute. We're not professionals. We're doing this as a hobby and as a fun event. So things will happen with family, with friends, with emergencies that come up with some of your teammates, unfortunately. So we need to cater for that and allow for that variance. But as long as we have as many scenarios as possible covered, we should be good. One last thing to practice during this week, and it's something that you wouldn't necessarily think of too heavily, but it's radio communications, and making sure that you've got open channels through Discord or other means with your team, so that during the race, your drivers are not alone flying blind. I would practice spotting during this week as well, to make sure that you know how to spot, you know how to jump into the crew chief position, and have a look at fuel stats, at tyre wear usage. Make sure that all of this is second nature before you jump into the main session. Practice driver swaps as well. practice removing driver, practice that driver removing themselves, you jumping in. This all is minor points, but very important when you're battling with someone else into the final hours of the race and you need smooth, clear pit stops, or you need to know when there are other cars around you and your relative might be lagging. Okay, you need your team to be able to coach you through those situations and know exactly what's happening so you can avoid damage at all costs. Now we're going to change gears a little bit and talk about the race. Okay, some key points, and these were pulled from a lot of the forums of experienced veterans from their own experiences in the 24-hour. So I'll run through them. Now again, it's 24 hours long. Don't push too hard, too early. Let people go if you can. This race is not one on the timing sheets, but in the amount you spend in the pits. Now, I ran a couple of races this year, a couple of special events, the Sebring 12-hour, the Bathurst 12-hour, the Basic Ollie series at Daytona. Now, in each of these races, actually Basic Ollie was a different scenario. We were not on the pace there. We didn't have an ideal setup for that race at short notice. But the others, we were on pace. We had the pace to win the event outright. Did we win the event outright? No, we did not. And we didn't win those events or even necessarily come close because we suffered too much damage at different stages of the race. Now, damage that was absolutely avoidable through one way or another, whether we were being too impatient or pushing too hard, or we just got caught up in a situation where with better spotting or better race awareness, we would have avoided. So again, this race is won in the pits and how much you can reduce that time stationary repairing damage compared to your competitors. Now, always have teammates spotting for you during the race. Be absolutely alert to yellow flags. So if you've got overlays from Race Labs or Caps or iOverlay, something of this nature, if a yellow flag comes up or if someone lets you know that there is a yellow flag visible, slow down. There are so many blind corners around the Nordschleife that it pays to be cautious. You may lose a few seconds on your rivals, you may lose a position, but avoiding that wreck because the blind corners could have a car sticking right out in the middle of the track. You won't see it until it's too late and until you're at the point where even if you slam on the brakes, you are crashing into that car and committing a load of damage. One small incident, honestly, can end your race competitively. You'll still go around, you'll still finish the 24 hours, but if you want to be competitive, you need to be mindful of these scenarios and avoid them at all costs. Now, overtaking, another thing to practice during race week, overtaking through the Nordschleife is very hard. There is one line for the majority of the circuit outside of a few key points that you can overtake on. One of those being the Dottinger Hoa, the main straight coming into the GP circuit. Great place to save your overtaking efforts in. Trying to pull too wide through the carousel and going high versus the other, it's not going to work. Okay, you're going to lose time and open up a world of risk trying those moves. So if you can avoid it, and if you can wait for the straight, it absolutely pays to wait for it. Okay, so you might be pressuring someone, you might be seconds quicker per lap. It won't matter unless you can wait till that point to make the overtaking pass. And vice versa. If someone is pressuring you, not too heavily, but they're going to get past, they will be thinking the same most likely, unless it's in the early stages and they're being overly aggressive. Definitely let them go if they are being a bit dangerous and a bit risky. But if they're just patiently waiting behind, again, as soon as you come onto the main straight, pull to the side. You don't necessarily need to lift because there will be a tow effect, but let them go. It will pay in the end. Again, curbs, know which curbs are friendly and the car can glide over, and which curbs will spit you out into different lines depending on how you encounter them. This race is about risk versus reward, so something to know well before joining the race session again, and communicate these dangers to your team. Okay, the curbs are an absolute threat from the first second to the last in this race. And I mentioned again, some curbs far more dangerous than others. So experiment with your springs, with your ride height, making sure you know exactly what they will do to the car or could potentially do to the car. Last point in this section, and it's paying attention to track temperatures. And don't monitor your laps too heavily. We all can get caught up on this. I think this was a key point for myself during the Bathurst 12 hour. I got very, very in tune with my pace, and pace was fantastic. It was in the low 2 minute and 3 seconds. Might have even gotten to 2:02s from memory, which was fantastic. But I was never going to lap in that range during the race if we were actually being competitive in a race scenario. So don't monitor this too heavily, because it could lead to you pushing too hard and making too many risks. If the track temp is rising as well, you will be well outside that ballpark. And if the track temp is lower, you might be thinking that you should be quicker, or you should be in a certain range when you realistically, with high fuel loads, with high tyre wear as well, you might be nowhere near that range. Okay, so keeping an eye on it might just lead to you having the wrong mindset and pushing far too hard in that scenario. Damage. During the race, if we get too much damage and we get a meatball flag, what do? In most races, in most scenarios, let's say we're racing on Tsukuba circuit. We're going to keep going, and we're going to go to the pits so we can avoid a tow, right? Well, this race on the Nordschleife combined circuit is 25.9 kilometers long. If you're meatballed and your car is significantly damaged, not to say not undrivable, but if your car is significantly damaged enough to get a meatball flag, tow. It might be a 7-minute wait to get back to the pits to actually start your optional repairs. But those 7 minutes are risk-free. Those 7 minutes, you are getting back to the pits. As opposed to the 7 minutes that you're scrambling to get back to the pits in a damaged car in a field of 55 other racers who are trying to get round you, the risk is off the charts. So keep it smart, keep it clean, tow if you can. You will avoid a lot of unnecessary incidents. Get back to the pits, you start serving your optional repairs, and clean slate, wipe it from memory, start again. Have a goldfish mentality, if you will. Okay, last points on this video, and it's all heavily focused around teamwork. I mentioned earlier, you cannot do this without a team, so you're going to need to keep them close and keep them in the loop on everything that's happening during this race. This is a monumentally long race, so have fun with it. Get your team around each other, jump in a Discord voice chat or something of that nature where you can all be together while you're on, while you're off. It makes spotting far more real, and it makes it feel like everyone is there in the pit lane with you, on the wall, monitoring you, and you doing the same for your teammates. Keep each other alert, and also make sure to encourage teammates to get rest. Rest is an overlooked part of this race from everything that I have seen. People thinking that they're pushing on, it makes them more tough, it makes them more seasoned to be able to do things the hard way and go solo for five stints back to back on the Nordschleife. That's going to take a toll. Okay, so encourage teammates to get rest when they need to. When they're off, get them to log off, get them to have an actual break, rather than getting around everyone else, being on the Discord chat for the whole event. Hopefully you'll have enough people there so that whoever's driving won't be lonely, won't be solo and isolated, so there'll always be someone on with them. Fatigue will set in towards the final 12 hours if no one does rest up and get the appropriate amount of rest. It will take a toll. Mistakes will start to creep in. We're all human beings. Okay, we're all built the same way. This will take a toll. Now, if you've been lucky enough to get to the finish line of a 24-hour race, you will know what I'm talking about here. Enjoy the moment. You've worked so hard to get to this. take photos, even if you haven't won or podiumed or anything of note. Take photos, do burnouts, post your results to your social channels, to Discord chats, wherever you've got other people who are interested. Show your family. I know my family gets around this and, heavily supports me in all these ventures that I run as well. I will be talking about it nonstop for weeks. So do the same. Enjoy the moment. Relish the opportunity that we all have to race a historic track like this in the cars that we do on this service. It's awesome. Enjoy it. And then when you have finally decided to say goodbye to everyone, log off. Don't jump into another official session or another hosted session or another league race. Log off. Digest the results. Let it sink in. Let the achievement and the result of finishing the race truly sink in. Relish the situation that you're in. This race is a huge achievement, so don't get stuck on your finishing position if it's not what you were hoping for or not the goal that you set. And then, you know what? We'll see you at the Glen for the 6 hours of Watkins Glen in June, which is the next special event coming up. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been helpful. Run it through as many times as you want during this week to make sure that you touch on all these points that we've covered. And we'll see you on the next video. Thank you very much.